Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 74 of the ITSM crowd. I am thrilled today to be joined by two really good friends of mine, Liz and Rachel, and our topic is leadership. So we're going to be talking about good leadership, bad leadership, leadership in a digital organisation, leadership in difficult times, because we've all had some interesting things to contend with this year. But the first thing I'm going to do is ask our guests to introduce themselves. So Rachel, if I can come to you first, please tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, thanks so much, Claire, and thank you for inviting me on. My name's Rachel McElroy, and I am CMO of Solutionize Global. So I've worked in the tech industry for about 7 years now, and I'm responsible for brand marketing, comms, internal and external messaging, engagement, and really driving the culture of our organisation, which has never been more important than this year.
Thank you very much. And Liz.
Thanks ever so much. I'm Liz Whitefield. I just realised I've known Rachel for 15 years and I've been getting her name wrong in all of that time. So thank you for that, Rachel. I'm Liz Whitefield. I'm a director at Hippo Digital. We're a service design consultancy based in the north of England and working across the UK. We support public sector service design and delivery, very much about making services as easy to use for people going through often very challenging times. I'm responsible for sales within the company and making sure we've got a pipeline of work for our great people that work for us, which, as Rachel said, is never more so important than it is today.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And I'm Claire Agutter. I'm going to be the host, facilitator for today's session. For those of you that are watching us live, you can ask us questions using YouTube comments. If you're watching this on YouTube live, you can put a comment in there. We can pick that up, put it on screen and actually address it during the session. So please do that because a bit of interactivity is always nice. If you're watching this on catch up, you can still find us on Twitter. So hashtag ITSM crowd. You've got the ITSM Zone Twitter account, and Rachel and Liz are both very active on Twitter as well. But please do put those comments into YouTube, and we'd kind of love to hear your thoughts on leadership as well. So we tend to start the ITSM crowd with definitions. And I think leadership is another one of these words that just gets thrown around. Sounds good, sounds important, but we're not always sure entirely what we mean by leadership and when we say someone's a leader. So the first thing I'm going to just ask you both is, what does leadership mean to you? And I think, Rachel, I'll come to you first on that one.
Okay, so leadership for me, I suppose, is having a clear view of the journey and the destination that you want to get to. Not necessarily having a completely fixed path, because you may have to meander and change direction, and being able to basically engage and I suppose educate and collaborate with people so that they can understand the vision, buy into that vision, and also help you to get to that vision. You've always got to take people with you. So I suppose for me, it's about engagement, it's about collaboration, it's about empowering people to be the best they can possibly be. As a good leader, really, you should be always encouraging your people on to become the best versions of themselves, because actually what you want to do eventually is make them better than you. So I think so I think that's a really big part of leadership. Really, you've got to have creativity, and people need to be able to follow you, and you need to show them the way. But it's a collaborative thing, really, and nobody wants to be in a dictatorship after all. So I think really it's trust, it's vision, it's creativity, it's the ability to be able to collaborate with a team of people to get the best possible outcomes for your customers and for yourselves as well.
Nice. And Liz, what would you add to that? Maybe thinking a bit about the difference between management and leadership as well, because quite often they seem quite blurred.
They are a little bit, and it's echo a lot of obviously what Rachel was saying there, and a good leader, I always strive to become redundant, I think, in the process, if I can. Maybe that's a bit of laziness in me, I don't know, as a leader. I think leadership is about the how, not the what. I think management is about what, and we can, I mean, like you say, there's so many areas you can read around this subject, and are far more intelligent and competent people than me that can give you a breakdown of that. But it's about behaviours very much. So you can manage a process and an outcome and get to an end result, but actually within a management context. But you've always got to think about what your style is in that. If it's a manager, and I don't want to downplay the management role. That's an equally important function, and a word we use for the valid reasons. A management role is about direction often. It's often about hierarchy, about structure and rigor, and that's all very important. But I think within leadership, it is more about empowerment and creating the right conditions. So maybe it's a little bit of idleness in me, I don't know, but something about creating the environment for the people around you to succeed around that. So there is a difference. It's about the style as well. And I think I was just reflecting on kind of emotional intelligence and EQ, IQ, and things like that. And that's about the leader having and whether you're a leader or a manager, being very, very self-aware of how your behaviour affects others, I think, around that.
Yeah, and I don't want to jump into politics, but one of the things I've been thinking recently is emotional intelligence in our government at the moment, and the leadership that comes through there, I think, is maybe a little bit lacking, but we could possibly diverted with that one. So I will jump on. But are leaders born or are they made?
Oh, interesting one. I mean, I don't think you can, from my perspective, when I look at my leadership style and my journey into leadership, at what point did that behaviour start to, sort of come to fruition? So I've had a really extensive career across delivery and public sector delivery. And I would imagine very much if I reflect back, it was very much about management, about managing a process. I was incredibly, unaware of people around me, and it was very much about getting that person to do the job. And this is nearly 30 years ago. And as you get more experience and you work with good leaders, I think you emulate leadership styles. So I do think it can be something that you can grow into if you're self-aware, it comes down to character and personality. But I think my leadership style grew from seeing really great leadership behaviours and learning and growing through that. But I'm not sure it's an innate. Can anybody be a good leader? I genuinely don't know the answer to that one, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. And I think ultimately you do, obviously, you learn from other people's behaviour, and we've all worked with good leaders, bad leaders, poor managers, good managers. And I suppose you want to try and learn something actually from everybody that you meet, and make sure that you keep your behaviours really in line with your values. I think if you've got strong values, then you know how to behave, and you know what behaviours will bring out the best in people.
Yeah, I think values is actually that's a really important thing, because I do think as a leader you need to have that direction that you're showing, and that comes from your values. If you're constantly getting pulled in different directions, it's very hard then for people to follow, because they'll find you unpredictable. So just a reminder to the people that are watching, you can ask us questions using YouTube comments. So if you are watching us live and you've got questions for Rachel and Liz, please do pop them into the comments, and we'll pull them up and address them now. But I think talking about kind of good leadership, bad leadership, I quite often say that in my career, which has been fairly varied, I can count on one hand probably the people that I would see as leaders that I would genuinely look up to. Have you got some examples that you can share of good leadership or even bad leadership that maybe people could learn from?
I think at the moment, I mean, what I personally feel has happened over, I suppose, over the last few years, and actually it's more evident than ever, is that hierarchies are a lot flatter. and certainly within the context of obviously the pandemic and COVID, is that you know, culture has really shone through. You've got to have that culture of empowerment, and I do think the companies that have had strong leadership and a really strong culture around, you know, staff being empowered has helped them to adapt and to be flexible and be creative and still sort of support their customers. So I think, you know, that sort of emphatic leadership styles have had to change. You know, we've all had to be a bit more honest, a bit more open, a bit more probably in touch with our emotions. Mm-hmm. So I think I've certainly seen some really good examples of leadership like that this year, and you know, and seen people that certainly inspire me. Our own leadership team absolutely included in that. You know, I would say that we're close, and we've learnt more about each other this year going through these situations than, you know, in the previous years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, if I think about, I mean, I'm not sure I'd use the word bad leadership. Actually, it's probably, I often find people who aren't demonstrating maybe the most effective leadership behaviours are people who are quite insecure in their own abilities. Often, you know, with leadership, you have to let go. You have to trust people, and I don't always get that right, but you have to, you know, help people to be what they can be. And I think sometimes with people who find themselves in leadership roles, really responsible, they might have a level on the badge or a pay grade or a title, but actually, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean they've got all the abilities. And I often think it's a vulnerability that translates into behaviours that are really negative, and it's not a great experience. I've witnessed some really, but I mean, I've had a bit longer than you, Claire, I'd say, to experience, both of you, around. I've worked with some amazing leaders. I work with some great leaders right now. I'm very spoilt with the company I work with, because there's some amazing leaders at all levels of experience as well. But it is, you know, it's about people feeling confident on what you can and can't do, I think, really, in terms of leadership. And you're right now, it's the real tester, isn't it? And what we found is honesty, is trying to retain that honesty, being honest with people, trying to, you know, to be transparent about how things are going. But I'd say that was our probably approach to leadership all the way through. And for us, we just had to ratchet that up a little bit more, I think, coming through COVID, I think, really.
Yeah,
I agree. And I think there's probably that human element of being a leader, which is sometimes understanding that the leaders of the organisation also feel maybe a bit embattled with everything that's going on, and having that honesty and openness in the organisation. And I think at the moment, maybe understanding that not everybody is as productive as they would be if this was a normal year. And kind of taking that into account as well. But something that you said just there, Liz, made me think, because you talked about having a lot of great leaders in your organisation, and Rachel, you said, you know, your leadership team's great as well. There's this tendency to think of the leader as a sole heroic figure who's kind of forging up the mountain ahead of everybody else. Talk to me about kind of leadership and teams. How does that work?
I can just kick that one off, I suppose, really. Well, it's really interesting, because I asked sort of my fellow hippos. I had opened on a chat this morning about, like, what do you want from leadership? What do you see in leadership? And what are the values that you see in leadership? And I think what they called out were things that nearly everybody in our organisation displays around authenticity, empathy. Vulnerability was a really interesting one, actually, and that's about honesty, I think, in that respect. So I think, for me, it doesn't matter what role you are within a team, you can demonstrate those behaviours of supporting others, you know, all being through, you know, sharing those experiences, working in the way that we do in digital. You know, if you're in that collaborative culture, it's about collaboration and recognising each other's strengths. That doesn't mean there aren't natural leaders. It doesn't mean that doesn't devolve people of accountability, though. And that's really important. It doesn't mean that if I'm as a director and responsible for sales, I'm accountable for that, and that's my responsibilities to make sure. But that doesn't necessarily, you know, negate the fact that there are other leadership strengths across the organisation.
Yeah, no, definitely. I have had similar conversations within the senior leadership team, and certainly for us, engagement across, you know, every person within the organisation and out into obviously our customers, and communication as well. You know, communication this year has been so important because we're not naturally with each other day in, day out. So, you know, that's where I suppose the teams have had to really work hard to keep that clear level of communication going, and also the cultural piece as well, because it's much easier when you're together in person.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that good leaders attract good people?
That's a very interesting question, actually, because very early on in the pandemic, David, our CEO, did an interview, and one of the points that he made in that interview was that he felt that all of the investment that he'd made in finding the right people in the business had actually paid him back in dividends, because now we were forced to change our operating models, you know, to work remotely, to you know, to basically work completely autonomously in a lot of cases as well, that trust and investment was you know, paying him back. And I thought that was a really interesting point, because we've certainly seen that across the business.
Yeah, same here. I think when I moved out of public sector into private sector sort of 3.5 years ago, you know, in a small digital startup with 7 people, and now we've kind of grown to a sort of 140 people working for us. We're attracting that level of talent. I think it's that we've got such a strong leadership team, some great people that work for us, as well as doing great work, really exciting work and important work. But you know, people come to work with people. There's no doubt about it. I think it's part of the culture of the organisation. So we've got, I think we've got a strong leadership team at kind of board level, the founding directors, that really represent the culture, accessible to people. We all have our grumpy moments, that's for sure. But I think we're honest about that. You know, about what's going on. And you know, and I have to say, I look at some of the people that I've respected and known for a long time that have worked with us, and it's quite awe-inspiring. Honestly, it does genuinely leave me feeling quite humble an awful lot of the time. The great people, and I hope that some of that is a culture that I think that is some of the culture we've created as a leadership team. Definitely, it has to be, really, I think.
Yeah. And has COVID kind of forced any changes in how leadership is working in your organisation? So I think, you know, there's always tendency in a time of crisis to go back to a more command and control style of running the organisation. Have you seen any changes that have been necessary, or have things kind of carried on in a fairly similar way?
I think for us, once we got through the initial barriers of obviously, can we work from home? Yes, we can. How, you know, business continuity and things like that. Things are very, very much business as usual. You know, we're still working on strategy. We're still working on bringing new products to the market. We're still working with organisations in a consultancy basis. You know, we're still out there in the field supporting our customers. And actually, the only thing that's really changed is we're not always together, and we're not obviously out on client site as well. So, but other than that, I would say that very little has changed. You know, we've been growing. We've got virtual onboarding. Kirsty, our chief of staff, has got virtual onboarding down to an absolute T. We're getting people through their, you know, probationary periods when they've actually never physically been in the office. So we're really sort of driving that. I do think that going back to what Liz said, that's, you know, a massive part of having a strong company culture and driving that through, because if you've got that to fall back on, especially at the moment, that really, really does put you in a very strong position.
I think it's almost dialing up. So we certainly were in the middle of a year of kind of building solid foundations, because it gets a bit serious when you've got a lot of people relying on you, and you get, there's we were in a very different position anyway, in terms of, right, let's get foundations in place. Let's make sure there is enough structure and rigor for people, so they understand where they sit. So we accelerated a lot of that. So a bit more process, but that was happening anyway, but not onerous. But then it was really dialing up that remote working. We're already kind of had things in place. And then we had a bit of, for us then it was about how do we engage with people, because we have a lot of physical kind of get-togethers. We come back to base, we work with clients. So for us it was how do you augment that? So we, again, introducing some new tools and techniques, different meeting cadence. Really, we have an advocacy group, which is sort of a general just small support networks across Hippo. So making sure those were working. So we just tried to shore up the things that we felt were important to people and to listen to people. I think our challenge is never to take that for granted, because my concern always is that people who are, maybe not getting the support, that we can't recognise that health, the well-being of people was the biggest concern for us about, have they got the physical environment that they need? Have they got the kits? Let's not have at the kitchen table if we can avoid it. Have they got broadband? But actually, have they got the support? Are they talking to people? And, video, without video, I don't know actually how, I think that would have been a very different story. We're all very comfortable with video calling. Actually, without that, I think that would have been incredible. I worry when people don't go on camera unless they tell me that they've just got out of bed. And I just worry, because you just almost want to see a person. So Rachel said, I met somebody in the office the other week. He's one of our senior engineers, and it's the first time I've seen him since he started 3 months ago. We were back in the office for a day, and I spent so much time with him on Zoom calls. I really felt it didn't feel like I didn't know him, except I hadn't seen him in 3D. It's sort of like, it's weird because you're taller than that.
It's
very weird. That's weird, but
So it's definitely strange.
Got a question here from Ivana, which is asking, what was or is still the toughest leadership test during the pandemic?
I think it's the constant change. Just when I'm sure Liz is in a similar situation as many businesses are, but we've probably been back in the office for 2 weeks, and now we're generally back out of the office again. So there's been so much time spent on business continuity planning, HR requirements, risk assessments, things like that. So it's dealing with, and I suppose feeling like you're making the right decisions in a constantly changing landscape, whilst making sure that you're bringing the money in, everybody's okay, people's mental health's all right. There's more plates to spin than ever. So I suppose, interestingly, we've been talking quite a lot around imposter syndrome, and it's come up quite a lot with people I've spoken to recently, actually. But when there are so many tough decisions to make, you do start to question actually whether you can make them. So this is nodding in agreement. So it is just because I'm in charge doesn't necessarily mean I have all the right answers. What are the answers? There's a good question. It is a very, very full on, and we've all had sleepless nights and everything else, just trying to do the right thing, really. Whatever that right thing may be.
I think I just felt the weight of responsibility right from day one. I'm responsible for people's, making sure there's a job for people to do. Worried about paying the bills and what could happen next. Health and well-being, have they got what they need? We'll be rewriting the hierarchy of needs coming out of the pandemic, and it's being responsive, I think. So I've for me, it's that weight of responsibility across, and I'm not on my own in that, which is great. But I think as a leadership team per se is how do we, our ambition is still to grow this company and to grow the services that we offer, but doing that within the context of how you operate, and it's doing lots of things. There's so many dimensions that are changing through the pandemic that you just can't predict. So how do you respond to that when you're trying to understand anything from your commercial strategy to where you hire staff from? Will they ever, lots of things to do. But at the same time, recognizing how incredibly fortunate we all are as well, which I think is really, really important, I think, in this situation.
Yeah. And I've got another question here from Ray, who's asking, what advice would you give to other leaders?
Shall I go first? Shall I go first on that one?
Yeah,
you go first.
Listen, I would say, never ever assume you know better, because there are lots of people that can do the job help you do the job better. So for me, I think that's a really important piece of advice. As well, be very self-aware, and create that. By doing that, you're going to create the right environment for teams, definitely. But listen to your people around you. Some great tools out there, I would say. If you're not aware of your leadership style, I would really encourage you to try and find ways to sort of become more self-aware. I've got various models of that, about understanding where I know where my weaknesses are as a leader, and that changes, but some of it changes. And I think just I'd really encourage you to sort of reflect a little bit on your leadership style, what's good for you as well, and engage with others on that as well. Yeah,
I think listening's a really, really important point, Liz. And I think as well, surround yourself with people that are on the same journey. I know it's a bit cliche, but rely on your support network, talk to each other. You're all in it together. You've got a strong leadership team, as we do, and it's really important to keep communicating and making sure that everybody's supporting each other.
Yeah, fully agree. And I think that point that you had earlier, Rachel, about values, that kind of can't be emphasized enough. So just we're kind of coming towards the end of time, which flies as always, but I just wanted to kind of touch briefly on if you see any differences in leadership in a kind of a fairly remote or digital organization. So I think all of us have been used to an element of home working, an element of not being co-located with the people that we work with. Is there any advice that you can give people who are maybe suddenly thrust into remote working about how they can still be effective as leaders?
Yeah, well, from my perspective is, try and find a mechanism by which you can continue to deliver your leadership messages and style and communication. So, it's not difficult. It is not difficult to get to a point where you can have conversations like this.
Yeah.
But possibly aren't aware of it. So face to face, in whatever form, speak to people, engage with people, to get a better understanding. I think that's really critical in that remote setting. And that's really hard. I know it's hard for some of our clients to get into that space, and technology can constrain it, but find a way. And even if you're creating smaller networks, to do that across your leadership team. But, I'd be worried if somebody hadn't spoken to another person in the company. And, it's that that really concerns me about working remotely. There are some great resources and tools out there that are free and open, and lots of people, there's a real community of people who work this way really effectively. It doesn't matter what sector they're in, they're all willing to share their experiences. We talked about, the festival going on at the minute. I'd encourage people to access all of that. Find the tools to do your leadership. It's a tool problem, not a leadership problem, if that makes sense. Right, but
yeah, I think as well with working remotely, you just have to have a lot of structure. You need to have a clear view of your goals and your strategy. You need to keep communicating it, come back to communicate, make sure everybody's engaged in the journey, and really, really drive home that structure. You should be having meetings, you should be having socials, we have a webcam on policy in our organization. There is nowhere to hide, but seriously, from a serious point, we want to be able to look at people and see, do they look all right? Why haven't they got the camera on? All of those kind of things. We have a duty of care to look after our people, because they're our biggest asset. So all of those things, you just have to keep your goals in mind and make sure you're organised and that you're getting the best out of the time that you've got.
Yeah, you can still have fun, can't you? You can still have fun, quizzes, team
good
events.
Old quiz.
We're all reinstating those now. We can't actually go anywhere.
There's nothing that makes me cringe like someone saying "fun." Oh no!
I'm you having fun. That's not true.
So Liz mentioned just then Leeds Digital Festival. So quite a lot of Liz's colleagues are contributing. The nice thing about this year is you don't have to be in Leeds to go to Leeds Digital Festival. So I would absolutely recommend take a look at the sessions list. It's happening right now, but it goes on for quite a while, and there's a whole range of things that you will definitely find interesting. I'm signed up to a few sessions, but I would really recommend that you have a look at that. And then Rachel, if you want to tell us a little bit about this link, please.
So annually Solutionize Global do some thought leadership pieces, and this year we are compiling 2 leadership white papers. One is for the Northern Powerhouse, so that will be publishing at the end of November, and that features companies that are based in the north around our HQ in Yorkshire. And we've already got some really exciting organisations taking part across the private and public sector, telling stories about their challenges and wins of the year, really. So some really positive leadership stories out of what has been a bit of a miserable backdrop. And then next year we will publish out a national one as well, which we'll publish at the end of March. So you'll find us posting quite a lot about it on LinkedIn, and Claire's obviously shared the link there as well. So it'd be amazing to get you involved if you're watching.
Thank you very much. And just then a kind of a publication that I want to mention is the Jigsaw Organization. So this is something that I've worked on with a huge amount of thinkers in our industry, and they've all contributed articles about how to put the pieces of your organization back together. So that's everything from leadership to mental health to collaborative working, remote working. So you can access that for free at that link there. And the reason I mention that is because in October, we have a bit of an ITSM crowd extravaganza. So lots of the contributors to that paper are contributing to ITSM crowds as well. So again, join us on those, ask any questions that you might want to, but you'll see those coming through on our social media as well. So I'm going to wrap us up now and say huge thank you, Liz and Rachel. That has been lovely to talk to you both, if nothing else. But some really valuable advice for people there as well. So thank you to everybody who's watching. Thank you to the people who asked the questions as well. And we will see you on the next ITSM crowd. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.